Hello, Danielle Carter here, and welcome back to my MBTI overview series. This is part two of a four-part series where I am giving a brief explanation of each of the preference pairs as it relates to leadership development. So if you have not yet seen part one, definitely go ahead and check that out. But in this video, I will be covering the preference pair of sensing and intuition, and which is the mental process of how we take in information. And then I'll tie that into the leadership development skill set of critical thinking and decision making. So let's just jump right in. And as I'm explaining each of the preferences, maybe listen and see which one you identify with the most. Now, in the world of Myers-Briggs, sensing has nothing to do with sensitivity, and intuition has nothing to do with a gut feeling or anything like that. Now, those with the preference for sensing will want to know the facts, look at specifics, adopt a realistic approach. They are really immersed and focused on the here and now, constantly collecting observations about the world around them. This is typically why they have an excellent memory and will be able to recall certain details. Very important to leadership development. Those with this preference trust using past experience as a point of reference. So these are my, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't reinvent the wheel, people. You know who you are. And last but not least, they really have to do things in order. So sequence is very important. They cannot move to the second item on the list until the first item is complete. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the preference for intuition. Now, those with this preference, they like to seek out new ideas, look at the big picture. They are very imaginative, thinking outside of the box. These are my forward thinking, future, always looking forward people. They have a natural proclivity towards conceptual frameworks and theories. Unlike those with a preference for sensing, sequence is of very little importance. So the thought process is less linear and a little bit more sporadic. Often they will visualize the final outcome and work backwards. Now, this will drive those with the preference for sensing crazy. But anyway, that is sensing and intuition in a nutshell. Now, if you are a dynamic leader, not average, but dynamic, you will become sophisticated in using both of these preferences simultaneously, or you will recognize when one thought process is more advantageous over the other, depending on the situation at hand. Now, not to go too much off topic because the focus of this video is critical thinking, but situational leadership theory implies or asserts that there is no one superior style of leadership, but that a leader's success is determined by their ability to adapt to the situation at hand. I will create a series on situational leadership later, but anyway, I digress. Now, in order to go a little bit deeper, we really have to get a basic understanding of what critical thinking is. So critical thinking is defined as the art of analyzing and evaluating thought processes with a viewpoint of improving them. Critical thinking is self-directed, self-disciplined, self-monitored, and self-corrected thinking. Critical thinking entails effective communication, problem-solving abilities, and a commitment to overcoming one's own ego. Now, to take this a step further and tie this into the sensing and intuition preference pair, we really have to look at the habits of a well-cultivated critical thinker. Now, on this list, I have 4, there are more, but for the sake of time, I just want to focus on the first 2. Now, a well-cultivated critical thinker will raise vital questions and problems, formulating them clearly and precisely. So, raising vital questions, that requires curiosity, thinking outside of the box, maybe looking at the bigger picture, which is aligned with what? Intuition, right? But then you have to be able to bring some of that in and to be able to formulate those problems and questions clearly and precisely. So when we talk about clearly and precisely, we're really talking about adopting a realistic approach and maybe an attention to detail that's aligned with the sensing preference. Okay, a well-cultivated critical thinker, number 2, will gather and assess relevant information using abstract ideas to interpret that information effectively. So gathering and assessing relevant information, that really requires exercising that sensing preference, collecting observations about the world, being really focused and immersed in the here and now, and really looking at the closest alligator to the boat, so to speak. But then you're using abstract ideas to interpret that information. So when we talk about abstract ideas, we're talking a little bit about the intuition preference. So we're seeking out new ideas, maybe doing a little research, looking up new concepts and frameworks and theories, but not necessarily relying on past experience as a point of reference. So those are just 2 examples of how type theory is related to critical thinking. Now, really, leaders need to be able to be fluid, to move back and forth across the spectrum as they're confronted with problems, ethical dilemmas, or maybe situations that will not allow us to use our past experience as a point of reference. Now, my approach to coaching and group facilitation is always to start with just a little bit of honest self-reflection, even before we move into any activities or exercises that improve critical thinking, or even before we explore any tools and methodologies that can enhance problem-solving capabilities. We really have to begin with a little discovery. So something I may say to those with a preference for sensing: tell me about a time when you failed to seek out new information and the consequences of doing that maybe had a negative impact. Now, on the opposite side, intuition. Someone with that preference, I may say, tell me about a time you were so focused on the big picture and the final outcome that you overlooked important details, which could have saved resources such as time and money. Now, these are just a couple examples, but really there are a lot of nuances to the preference of sensing and intuition. Now, from a change management perspective, if there is not enough critical thinking going on in the leadership aspect of the organization, that can become a barrier to change, innovation. If leaders are not using that effective communication aligned with critical thinking, they can create a disconnect in between the leadership and subordinates, as well as key stakeholders. So there's a lot of things that can go on if there is not some resources invested into the professional development of the leaders as it relates to critical thinking. So I know this was a lot of information that I just threw at you right now. So think of this as maybe like a virtual syllabus to a larger, broader content area. If you have any questions or there's some things you want to discuss around this subject matter, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I look forward to working with you and increasing effectiveness and efficiency in your organization. Thank you and have a great day.